Hello, and today's purpose of the day is I can solve two-step equations. Let's take a look at a few examples. 6x minus 2 equals 22. I need to isolate my variable and solve for x, so I'm going to do the inverse operation of subtracting 2 and add 2 to both sides. When I add 2 to both sides, these two 2's cancel out, and I'm left with 6x equals 24. Now to isolate my variable x, I divide by 6 on both sides and get x equals 4. And remember, I can plug my solution back into the original equation and make sure that the statement holds true. And so 6 times 4 minus 2 had better equal 22. And 6 times 4 is 24, minus 2 is 22. So I've got that correct. All right, let's take a look at the next example. X minus 3 divided by 4 equals negative 2. Before I can do anything to try and solve for x, I need to look at this division of 4. And I need to get rid of that division of 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply the entire side by 4 as well as the entire other side of the equation by 4. And that way the 2 will cancel out there, and I'll just be left with x minus 3 equals negative 8. Last step to isolate x would be to add 3 and get x equals negative 5. T divided by 3 minus 2 equals negative 7. So again, I'm going to look at isolating my variable, but I have to do the adding 2 first, or the opposite of subtracting 2, before I can worry about that division of 3. So if I add 2 to both sides, I'm left with t divided by 3 on the left-hand side, and negative 7 plus 2 is negative 5. And then last step would be to multiply by 3 on both sides. So I'm left with t equals negative 15. Let's keep cruising along. And now I want to solve my variable here for r. So the opposite of this positive 2 would be to subtract 2. And 6 minus 2 is 4, but now on this left-hand side, I'm left with a negative r. And I cannot write my solution with a negative variable. So I have a couple options that I can do here to get rid of the negative in front of the variable. I could simply multiply by a negative 1 on both sides and get rid of that negative, or I could divide by a negative 1 or a negative on both sides. And really, either option is the same operation. You're just moving the negative sign to the opposite sign. So if I divide by a negative 1 or divide by a negative, 2 negatives become a positive, and I get positive r. And on this side, positive 4 divided by a negative 1, would result in a negative 4. So really what I was doing is I just flipped both of the signs on both sides of the equation and got r equals negative 4. All right, looking at the next example, I have 9 minus p divided by negative 2 equals 4. So again, to get rid of that division of 2 right away on the left-hand side, I'm going to multiply both sides by negative 2. And I'm left with 9 minus p equals negative 8. Subtract 9 on both sides and get negative p equals negative 17. But again, I can't have a negative variable, so what I'm going to do is divide by a negative, and it turns into a positive, so I'm left with p equals, the 2 negatives here turn into a positive, and I get p equals 17. Okay, as we continue, negative 3y minus 7 equals negative 1. I'm going to add 7 to both sides. Left with negative 3y equals 6. Divide by a negative 3, y equals 6 divided by negative 3 is negative 2. And again, what I'm not doing right now is I'm not plugging in my answers back into the original equation to make sure they are true. But if you have extra time when you're working on homework, assessments, I would take the time to go back and plug them in to make sure that you know you are correct. Negative 3x plus 4 equals negative 5. Okay, so I'm going to subtract 4 first and get negative 3x equals negative 9. and then divide by a negative 3 and get x equals positive 3 for my final solution. All right, and last example on this page, I'm going to go ahead and subtract 2 and get 3p equals negative 3, then divide by a 3, p equals negative 1. Great job following along. We went through a variety of different examples here to help you get started on solving two-step equations. Now let's take a look at a few word problems involving two-step equations. Aaliyah had some candy to give to her 4 children. She first took 10 pieces for herself and then evenly divided the rest among her children. Each child received 2 pieces. With how many pieces did she start? Well, let's first define our variable. Let's let C equal the number of pieces of candy. So she started with C pieces of candy, and then she took 10 for herself. So we'll subtract 10 because she took 10 for herself, took 10 away. Then she took what she had left over and divided it evenly among her 4 kids. And after she had done all of that, she was left with 2 pieces. So that gives us the equation C minus 10 divided by 4 equals 2. Now let's go ahead and solve that equation. So what I will do is I will multiply both sides by 4. I'm going to run out of room here. So if I multiply by 4, I'm just left with C minus 10 equals 8. And I'll add 10 to both sides and get C equals 18. So she started with 18 pieces of candy. Now let's see if this makes sense and if this works. So she started with 18 pieces of candy. She took 10 for herself. So 18 minus 10 would be 8, right? So far she would have 8 left. Then she divided the rest among her 4 children. And so that would be divided by 4, and then each child received 2 pieces, and 8 divided by 4 does equal 2. So we know we're right when she started with 18 pieces of candy. Let's take a look at the next example. For a field trip, 4 students rode in cars and the rest filled 9 buses. How many students were in each bus if 472 students were on the trip? So 472 students were on the trip, 4 students rode in cars, and the rest filled 9 buses. And the amount of students in each bus is what we don't know. So that's what we're going to assign our variable to. So let's call B our variable, and that will represent the number of students per bus. So to set up my equation, I know that 9 students, or 9 buses, have a number of students in them. So I'm going to say 9 times the number of buses, or students in each bus, plus the 4 students of extra that rode in cars, will equal the total number of students on the trip, which is 472. So again, that is 9 buses times how many students are on each bus, which we called B, plus the 4 students that rode in cars, has to be equal to the total of students on the trip, which is 472. Now, if I solve this resulting equation, I will be left with my variable B, which is how many students are on each bus, which is what I want to complete or solve for. So let's go ahead and solve this equation. So I'm going to subtract 4 right away from each side, and I'm left with 9B on the left-hand side equals 468. So 9B equals 468. Last step will be to divide by 9, and I get B is equal to 52, which would be students on each bus. All right, let's take a look at the last problem here. You bought a magazine for $4 and 8 erasers. You spent a total of $28. How much did each eraser cost? So let's define our variable. we need to figure out how much each eraser cost. So I'm going to say E is my variable, and that's going to represent the cost of an eraser. So now I need to set up my equation. So I have 8 erasers times the cost of each eraser, we don't know that, plus $4 for the magazine had better equal the total of $28 that we spent. Now I'm going to solve this equation and figure out the price of each eraser. So 8E equals 24, divide by 8. So each eraser cost $3. And there we go, we have solved that word problem. Great job working through those word problems. Thanks for listening and have a great day. Bye.